attending our very first virtual lunch and learn. It's a little different, I'll have to admit, but you know, unlike maybe other lunch and learns, you don't have to worry about parking, and you can heat up your food and eat it. We won't judge. So grab some coffee or tea. I know I'll admit I'm a little nervous about this, so I had a little extra coffee this morning, so please bear with me a little bit. But yeah, so this will be a little bit of an experiment, and hopefully we can keep this going in this virtual sort of lunch and learn. If you like it, if you have any other feedback on it, please let us know, or any other subjects you want us to cover. This lunch and learn kind of came about fairly serendipitously. It was a project that I had been working on for about a month and a half, and I realized I was spending a lot of time with it, and so I figured, well, let me talk about it a little bit more than just a video, which there will be a video that we'll publish with it afterwards. But I wanted to give members a little extra preview, a little extra insight to what we are working on. So with that, it looks like everyone, it just helps if everyone makes sure that you're muted, which it looks like everyone is. And yeah, so can everyone hear me okay? See, you could just thumbs up. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so I'll give it just another minute. Looks like some more people are coming in, but any questions or anything before we begin? Nope. All right. All right. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me lower the brightness. Oops. Okay. All right. Here we go. Everyone can see my screen? Thumbs up if you can. All right, let's go. All right, so the project and the house that we are looking at today is actually 226 East Lake Drive. This is a house that I've passed by a lot, and especially now during this time and during quarantine, you know, how you really start to look around your own neighborhood, your own houses, and just you start to look at things a little bit deeper. This particular house, like I said, kind of came about serendipitously. Like I said, I drive by it all the time, but I was looking through some subject files in our archives, and I actually came across a document where someone was attempting to put this house on the National Historic Registry. And I read through it, and it was just kind of a lightning bolt moment. And I looked a little bit further into the house and found out the house was actually for sale. So if you have 1.7 million, we can we can buy the house. I contacted the real estate agent and actually got a really cool insight and got to tour the house. And so this is done with full permission from the real estate agent. The current owners know about it. And so before we begin, I do have some people I want to thank. Actually, let me move this. I do want to thank the current owners, Keenan and Danielle Nix, the designer of the home, which you'll see on the inside. The interior design was done by Donna Campbell of Donna Campbell Homes. The landscape, Jane Bath of Land Arts Garden. And then, of course, the realtor, which was Cindy Smith, realtor at Beacham and Company Realtors. And then what was really cool, too, is that we got to use some footage from drone footage that they took of the property. So you'll see some drone footage that was taken of it, the interior drone footage, which I didn't realize was a thing, but it is, and exterior. So I kind of put it all together. And so that's some of the photos that you'll see are from the actual realtor site and or the drone footage. All right. So, all right. So like I said, this property is located on the corner of Eastlake and Memorial Drive. And so before we begin anything, I think we have to start really at the beginning, and we have to start in Tudor England. We are talking about Tudor Revival style, and I think it's one of those styles that we all think that we notice, but hopefully through this lecture, you'll be able to spot even more some of those details which really make it Tudor. So we have to start with the beginning. And Tudor architecture is the final evolution of medieval architecture in England during the Tudor period from 1485 to 1603. This is a broad style, was most popular for residential architecture, especially manor houses that can afford expensive materials, such as brick and decorative window and timber work. However, whilst large stately manor houses were flourishing in this style, smaller, more modest examples were also found due to the general increase of wealth and prosperity to the lower classes. What makes it Tudor were the flattening of the Gothic arch to a Tudor arch, which you could see a little bit kind of right here, but we'll see plenty of examples of that. It's just kind of like a flattening arch. Exposed timber, which all throughout here. Oriel windows, which is basically kind of a fancy bay window. Plasterwork. And you might also see a jetty or small overhang of the second floor over the first. So we see that over here. Many of the forts and castles were beginning to turn more towards residential manor houses, and we'll see this influence well into the revival style of kind of this fort kind of castle influence as well. Okay. So the Tudor Revival. The American Tudor Revival is among the most recognizable styles of domestic architecture. These picturesque houses, usually of brick or stone, fill entire suburban neighborhoods. English architecture had long influenced American taste, of course, from the colonial houses of New England and Virginia through the Gothic revivals of the 19th century. But never was Anglophilia most apparent during the Tudor craze. In the first wave, the wealthy asked the architects to build stone manors with Jacobean parapets and oriels. As the style peaked during the 1920s and 30s, streetcar suburbs sprouted pitched roof cottages with masonry veneer and decorative half timbering. And so a lot of the styles, you can sort of pinpoint it to a cross gable, decorative half timbering, which is here, prominent chimney. We see here it's on the side. Many of them are on the front. Narrow multi-paned windows here and there. Entry porches or gabled entry. Patterned stonework or brickwork. Overhang gables or second stories. And a parapet or Flemish gable. And we don't see that there, but the parapets are those, it's kind of like a false roof and makes the roof look a little bit taller than it actually is. But tons of these were sold as plans, and this is just one plan of the Colton. And we see more, excuse me. And this picture does a great example of kind of breaking down some of these other of the natural materials, steep roof lines, and there. Tudor arch, and there you see that flattening arch. Focal chimneys, especially here. Multi-pane windows, overhangs. And here we see another, another example. One of the other features too that I noticed, a lot of Tudor Revival homes, they feature, they're kind of a little bit compact in a way, and they're all focused around a center foyer. So this one's very compact. Later on, a lot of them were built on and added onto, and but those were all later additions. Of course, Tudor Revival in DeKalb County. Avondale is one of the most easily recognizable examples of Tudor Revival. Here, I mean, you see it all. You see the multiple casement windows, you see the multiple gables, you see the half timber, and you see those overhanged jetties. And this is also in Avondale as well. This one's a little bit more eclectic. The porches, though, which is interesting, a lot of the Tudor Revival, you see the porches are fairly enclosed, like this one. But this one's a pretty eclectic version. And then, of course, Callanwald is another great example. Okay, so with that, we'll actually kind of take 226 Eastlake as kind of a case study and explore a little bit deeper if it is Tudor Revival, if it's not, you know, what inspirations were brought into this home. But before we really begin into this, we kind of have to talk about the history of the neighborhood. And Eastlake as a neighborhood was founded in 1892 by the Eastlake Land Company. If you live in the area, you might have noticed these stone structures, which actually say established 1892. It was a neighborhood developed by a company. And these are still, there's one on, I believe it's Candler and Hosea. And then this one is on Hosea and Eastlake Drive. So it's kind of a fun relic that you would never notice until you actually spot it. Asa Candler purchased the remaining lots after Eastlake Land Company basically kind of went bankrupt, and helped to develop the neighborhood further. The Atlanta Athletic Club, of course, today Eastlake Golf Club, was founded in 1904 and incorporated as an independent city in 1908. That was something I didn't realize until doing this, was that Eastlake was its own city with its own city council and mayor. But here's some early advertisements to purchase lots in Eastlake. And it says, the Eastlake Land Company have built about 3 miles from Decatur, a lake 35 acres in size. It is a very pretty body of water. One of the things with the Atlanta Athletic Club that they had, there was a pavilion, there were boats. It was a resort community. And here's the second page to it. At a cost of $20,000, they have built one of the prettiest lakes in the South. It is the future summer resort of Georgia. The company is now at work on a driveway to be 4.5 miles long, following all the arms and curves of the lake. A magnificent avenue, 80 feet wide, leading from the railroad to the hotel have already been graded. Of course, this is the Atlanta Athletic Club, later the Eastlake Country Club and Golf Course. And here it is today, obviously another Tudor Revival. So Eastlake, as I mentioned, was actually incorporated as a town, And this is a document from the city of Atlanta from 1908, and it actually mentions it being incorporated. One of the other main features of Eastlake and the neighborhood is the building of Eastlake Road. This was something else I didn't necessarily realize until I read it. You know, driving on Ponce, you see Eastlake Road, it's curved, it kind of winds around. Well, that was actually built as a direct path from Ponce all the way through Oakhurst, directly straight to Eastlake Golf Club. It was paved early on, and it was constructed in 1912. So really, Eastlake neighborhood was developed as a summer resort community. There are still a few cottages, and actually, excuse me, I think one cottage still remains that was built as one of those more summer communities, and it's still here. It's actually located right around this park. But by 1916, it was mentioned in the Atlanta Journal that the streetcar, quiet streets, and the athletic club made demand for houses in Eastlake almost to boom proportions. This part of town was much more sleepier and a suburban oasis for wealthy Atlantans. And the house that we're talking about is actually located right there. This is actually the town of Eastlake, Georgia. What's really kind of interesting about this, it mentions the mayor, Thomas Paine, and it actually is a little bit cut off, but up here it actually mentioned that this city council meeting took place at the mayor's home, which the property is the one that we're talking about, which is kind of cool. But it's kind of fascinating, the fact that Eastlake was actually its own town. It was incorporated in, I believe, 1928 into the city of Atlanta. So the property that we're talking about was originally on Pavilion Drive, which is here. Fair Street is now Memorial. This was built before Eastlake Drive, which is actually, you could sort of see the beginnings of it right here. But we're talking about the property that would have been here, there, and here. And this was a Sanborn, or a map from a little bit later, but you can see T.B. Paine and his property, which is here. Now, Thomas Paine actually remained mayor until 1915. And one of the things that we were sort of wondering was if he actually built the house that we're talking about today. And we don't believe so. We actually think the house was built a little bit later. So there was another house that he lived in, but it was still the same property and the same lot. The next owner is actually Charles E. Shepard. He lived in the home, or on that property, from 1919 to 1935, and he was another mayor of Eastlake from 1923 to 1925. We believe it was actually built by Charles Shepard, the home. We believe the home was built in 1920. So I guess you could say that the property is actually home to two mayors of Eastlake, but only one resided in the actual home. Charles Shepard was a division manager of Southeastern Division of Gulf Oil Corporation, and like I said, lived on the property from 1919 to 1935. This is a Sanborn map from 1939, which was the earliest that we could see of the property and of the house. This is the porch. It actually shows it being a story and a half, and this is the garage. What was interesting was that Charles Shepard actually bought this property, and that's why this section is actually separated. He first purchased this piece of property here, and then later built the rest of it, or bought the rest of it. Okay. So we can start talking about the actual property. We might be quick to classify this as a Tudor Revival, however, it's not so simple or easy. Tudor, English Cottage, English Vernacular are all styles that historians, architects, and casual observers use interchangeably. For the sake of consistency, English Vernacular style was set forth by the Historic Preservation Division of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. And according to their style guide, the English Vernacular Revival was a common early 20th century style in Georgia's suburban neighborhoods. Drawn from the domestic architecture of medieval England, this style was based on English country and vernacular houses, ranging from small cottages to large manor houses. The result was a combination of medieval English features. So essentially, yeah, it was kind of confusing, and it was one of those things that I think in a way you sort of have to pick and choose what terminology, but they're all a very broad style and eclectic description. So this home is really a broad front massing, which means that you have just a small gabled L-ish. It's practically rectangular with a slight forward projection from the gable. The roof line is across gable and is very steeply pitched. I mean, you can especially see it here, but it is a very steep roof. And we see a cat slide. It's not as maybe dramatic or sort of curved, but it is a cat slide roof. I thought that was kind of a funny way to describe it. But moving into the entranceway, it does make the elevation softer and a little bit more charming, which is the whole Tudor Revival style. And the roof is a slate roof, and to our knowledge is original. So one of the fun things that I learned about that cat slide roof, this area, really originated from, Tudor England, where you may have had thatched roofs and it would have dipped down. So that's where that whole style came from. And here we see the cross gable. It is practically rectangular. The backside doesn't jut too far out, but it's again that very compact house. Steep roofs, porch, and a chimney. Here we see a close-up of that roof line. You could see how steep it is, especially over here. And it's the slate roof. And like I said, the agent mentioned that she believes that it is original. It's a brick ornamentation. We can see that in the brick, it's a little red, a little black, a little purple. So it's actually a very pretty brick. And it's a natural mosaic. It almost makes the house kind of camouflage into the background. And around the windows and doors, here, concrete cast tabs that emphasize the shape. And actually, better picture of the oops, sorry, skipping a little ahead. So across the windows and doors, concrete cast tabs, a molding over the doors or windows. And so you see here and there, And there. In medieval architecture, this was called a dripstone or hood mold, and it extends horizontally across the top of an opening, returns vertically downwards, terminating in a label stop. And an easy way to think about this is that originally the term dripstone comes from stalactite rock formations in caves. So the same idea. Water forms down into these almost stalactites, but in medieval architecture, this is the version they came up with. We have a tall, narrow, multi-light casement picture window that stretches across the home here, and as well as here. And we'll see in another later photo that the windows are actually slightly recessed to create a thicker appearing wall. And that brings it back to that fort, that kind of castle feel that a lot of Tudor homes make it feel like. We do see the door, front door, as a Tudor arch. And we believe this awning was probably added later, but not too sure. So here again, this is those label stops. And like I said, the idea with the medieval architecture is that rain sort of comes down and goes off the sides. So this door, this is actually an original door with the Tudor arch, and that is a heavy plank and panel door. And the window, that we see is actually, it really, I think, refers back to, circle crown glass, which you see, which was a expensive, but a way of creating glass windows in Tudor England. And that's what this is. And I think that that's what this is in referencing. But to my knowledge, this is also an original leaded glass window. And if we go back one, this was another kind of deep dive. This is actually the handle, the front handle here. I was slightly fascinated by it, and believe it or not, I believe I actually found the catalog of where you can purchase this. This is actually a catalog from, I believe, the 1930s, but this style, the Newcastle style design, which, I mean, this is it. The Newcastle style was actually a style of door hardware made by Yale Town Manufacturing that you can purchase really from 1919 up until 1940s and 50s. The thing that was really curious to me were the engraving here and the initials, and I have no idea what they reference. I've looked up every owner, company. That to me is a bit of a mystery. But I just, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole and I actually found the original hardware, which is here. There's the window. And here again, the window, the dripstone hood mold. You could see an original example of it here in this castle and also in this archway as well. But you could see the waved windows and a good up-close coloring of the brick. And as we move around back to the porch, this is where we see the half timber porch. This is actually a picture of the porch in 1986. So we could see that it was originally built in the property because of the slate roof, but it was later on plastered to create enclosed porch. But here is the back of the property, and we can actually see here the chimney, which this chimney is not as prominent as, say, a lot of other Tudor Revival examples, but it is modestly decorative, but it does have two flumes, which was something that you see in a lot of other chimneys. And we see this isn't quite an oriel window. This bay window was probably added a lot later because it's a different material, and it originally was a siding. It's painted now to look more integrated to the rest of the home. And as we move inside the home, I know it's a little fast. We can go back. Oops, sorry. So as we move inside, you see again the Tudor arch. And it's actually hard to see, but right here on the inside in the foyer is a small, very narrow window. And in the formal den, so if we sort of remove a lot of the furnishings and the wall coverings, which are much more inspired by the English style, but if we kind of strip all of that away, we still see some classic examples of Tudor Revival, especially in the ceiling, those heavy timber ceiling, and the fireplace. Fireplace is a very heavy concrete cast fireplace. There are some engravings in it. I believe, though, this was actually not a unique one, that it was actually just a precast fireplace. In one of the documents that I read, it mentions that it's similar to the Eastlake Golf Club crest. That I am not sure of, but this is the crest inside, which I believe is just, for lack of a better word, I believe it's just kind of random symbols. And again, we see a Tudor arch interior. And on the interior, this is actually an upstairs landing. This door goes to the attic, which was built into later, but it is a 1.5 stories, and this is the right side of the home with the bedrooms. But this window is actually kind of an inset dormer, and you can see the Tudor arch. And again, just another view of the back. Now, one of the other things, I mentioned that there was a landscape gardener. The garden is also very, very impressive, and it's very decorative, but we'll mention that in a second. But here, one of the other really interesting features is that this tower really reminded me of the Eastlake Golf Club, the facade of that. But here we see another very indicative of Tudor style, which is a storybook door. So it's kind of charming. It looks like a fairy tale, and that's leading into the basement. And so this is the back. We see this was originally a garage that's now just made into kind of a guest house. But the garden, it features granite terraces that were basically discovered by the current owners after being severely neglected and overgrown. There is a cook's chimney which was probably built around the same time as the terraces. It's made out of the same granite material and really reflects that mid-century backyard barbecue. But this garden reflects the Tudor style of winding natural design. The water feature, which we will see. Water features were common in Tudor, and it also has a feeling of a fairy tale kind of feeling, which a lot of these English natural landscape designs made it feel like. And here we just see another example of the backyard. This is just one terrace. It goes back to another terrace and then another terrace, and there's about three granite terraces. And here's that chimney again. And so it brings us back to the front. You know, in researching this house, it's kind of easy to immediately assume that something is either Tudor or it was built older or newer. And kind of in deep diving into it, sometimes homes appear more than they are, or they don't appear. This one was an interesting example of one that really had some elements of Tudor. I wouldn't classify it as a high style, but it really reflects this eclectic mixing of different features, different typical elements of Tudor, but also some non-typical. The inside didn't have a lot that was reflected other than the den and the Tudor arches. Most of the interior was kind of redone. But this was an interesting way for me to learn about Tudor, but also deep diving into it, you can kind of pick it apart and yeah, see if it's high style or not. But that is all I have on it. I hope you learned a little bit about Tudor Revival. Maybe you've seen that house, maybe you've driven by it. But I hope that you learned a little bit about the history of Eastlake and that house. But also maybe there's a Tudor Revival in your own neighborhood, or maybe you've driven by a Tudor and now you can sort of see those very specific pieces that make it a Tudor. With that, are there any questions or anything?
Good job, Marissa.
Thank you. This is a learning experience, so if ever anyone has any...
Can we get this? I missed the first part. Can we?
This is being recorded, and there's also a video that will accompany this that we'll publish. Okay. That we'll publish in a little bit.
Thank you.
Do you have a question, Terry?
Did I miss the architect's name, or do we know?
That was the thing. I could not. I don't know. The agent mentioned, you know, it was a contemporary of Neil Reed, which, I mean, that's a very broad description of the architect. I couldn't tell you, and that's why it was also a little difficult figuring out the actual age of the home too. I know that the listing was very quick to mention it was built in 1906, which I think we quickly sort of figured out. I don't think that was the case. Tax records do show 1920, so we think it was closer to 1920.
It looks 20s. I notice a strong similarity to a house on Ridgecrest that's right close to the Eastlake MARTA station. It's just one block off of Howard Avenue or DeKalb Avenue. And that house was redone 15 or 20 years ago. Have you noticed that house also, and do you know anything about it?
I couldn't tell you which one in particular you're mentioning, but I know that I've seen sort of in having this house in my mind for a couple of weeks, I definitely see it in a lot of other houses, and a lot more modest example houses that maybe are smaller, not brick, maybe just wood. I see it everywhere now, and I see that sort of design. So I do see it a lot. Yeah, that's why it made me think that this house wasn't as special per se, or really designed truly by an architect. It probably was, but it's a little bit more of a modest example of a Tudor Revival but there are those small elements. But yeah, there's a lot of those sort of houses that you start seeing that are very similar.
What did the garage look like?
The garage is just a complete guest house now. It's all modern. The original garage is just a typical 1940s garage. That was brick. It was originally painted white, and it's now matching the brick. They've, I guess, removed the paint. Just like how they removed the paint on the porch to make it look more blending in and matching a little bit better with the rest of the coloring of the home. But today, the guest house, I didn't show anything in the guest house. I toured it. There's nothing particularly special about the garage.
What is a cook's chimney?
I think that was just a fancy way to say that it was just a barbecue. A barbecue, you know, in sort of reading the house. If you look at the real estate listing, which that was sort of partly what kind of started this whole deep dive, and what they mentioned, and they mentioned a cook's chimney, and I think the chimney was just built with the rest of the terraces, which were probably much later. But it would have been a great house for entertaining. And if it were home to one mayor of Eastlake, it was actually, I have a listing of the other owners, and they're all very kind of well-to-do owners. And actually, a lot of the owners have a lot of connection to Georgia Tech. And a lot of people in Eastlake, actually, it was something that drew a lot of Georgia Tech alum and were to the Eastlake neighborhood.
Is the original hotel from Eastlake still there?
I'm not sure. I think that was on the property of the athletic club. That's no longer there. Yeah. But it was a fairground originally that had a pavilion, and you could go out on the lake there, which was actually man-made, created. They dammed it up. There's a creek that runs through today Eastlake Park, and they dammed it to create the lake there.
Marissa.
Yes.
Robert Moore had a question. Many of the houses in Druid Hills, even some modest ones, had quarters for live-in staff, maid, yard man, etc. Did you see evidence of live-in staff quarters?
I did not. There wasn't any accessory buildings either on the Sanborn map. It actually, the house, if you remove the built-in attic, the basement also had like a large furnace room. I didn't see any examples of that. Like I said, I think this was built much later, where that wasn't necessary. But today in the basement, there is a full apartment basically situation, and the upstairs there's a large basically bedroom, multi-purpose room in the attic. But it's really just a kind of a 3-4 bedroom when you take away all the other features.
And in order for something to have servants' quarters, it would have had to have had 2 staircases, and this one just has 1, right?
Yes, just
Yeah.
one major sort of central
And then for those who aren't on the chat, Best Short House said there are more photos on Zillow if you want to see the interiors and water features in the garden.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. A lot of the interior, I didn't bring up a lot of them because there wasn't a lot of particularly good examples. And that's something that I realized a lot of interiors of other Tudors were always generally redone. This one isn't done to be super modern, but it doesn't feel like an original Tudor. There are coved ceilings in the bedrooms, but I believe that was done later. There are other.
You know if there's an open house planned?
I don't know. I told the agent, I was like, maybe I can find you an owner. So if there's anyone, I think it went down a little bit in price, just like 100,000. It is a very beautiful, it's a beautiful property, the outside. Melissa, are there any more?
What's the address again?
I'm sorry?
What is the street number address again?
It is 226 East Lake Drive, Southeast.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we do have a suggestion for pooling our money and buying it, but
the one good thing about the property is that there's the current owners, they're actually just staying in the East Lake neighborhood, but they rent out the guest house on Airbnb, and the basement's a separate apartment. So I mean, I guess that helps with the price. You could, bring in help with the mortgage, right? The apartment and the guest house.
And then there's one more comment from Robert that the Atlanta trolley maps around 1940 show a streetcar branch going to the East Lake Golf Club.
Yes, that was the East Lake Drive, from Ponce. That was also a streetcar. And it was also paved very early on. There's a cool photo. I didn't include it because it wouldn't translate the photo. It was pretty grainy, but it shows it being paved. So it was paved very early on. It was to try to draw all those crowds. It's funny to think about it as a completely separate suburb resort community when it's only a few miles from downtown. Any other? Let's see.
What is the history of the golf club? Was it privately held by the neighborhood owners, or was it open to the city? Is it still an operating golf club?
Oh yeah, it is definitely still an operating golf club. It originally was the Atlanta Athletic Club, which just meant a golf club. In the 1960s, when the neighborhood was changing, it moved to Johns Creek, and it became the East Lake Golf Club instead of the Atlanta Athletic Club. Both still exist today. One is in Johns Creek in North Fulton. But the inside, it's still very much of an operating club. Famously, Tom Cousins really redeveloped East Lake and transformed the community. There's a lot of articles and history about it, how just by redoing the club, it really completely changed the neighborhood. I think a lot of people would say for the better. It's a lot less crime. It's pretty desirable now. And the stretch, the road, Alston Drive, which is where the club is off of, is a really pretty street with a lot of very historic homes. Famously, Colonel Robert Alston has his Meadow Nook, which is one of the oldest homes in Atlanta, is actually still there. That house was built in 1850s, so you can still see it today. And there's some other homes from I think the 1890s that are older than this property. But the club is still, you know, I think the PJ Tour Masters. I should know this. There's a huge tournament that takes place every year there. So it's still very much of an active, exclusive, very exclusive club. Let's see, any other questions? Anything else? Well, thank you everyone for attending this virtual lunch and learn. Like I said, if you have any suggestions on what to do next, or what you'd like to see, or if you liked this format, if there's a way to make it better, I think this will be a way that we'll keep doing lunch and learns for it looks like the foreseeable future. So yeah, and if and we do have another member virtual happy hour coming up, I believe next week. So we're asking everyone to bring something that's another show and tell edition, but something that's red, white, or blue. So make sure, and then so yeah, maybe we'll see you all then.